Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Today's session, we're going to talk about creating accessible PDF documents from Microsoft Word. Why did I choose to do this session, right? Like, why is this important? Well, you're fine. My passion is document accessibility. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and so I kind of live and breathe documents. I come from the printing industry, and I've been creating documents for a very long time. And a while back, I was doing a presentation at a conference talking about the PDF format and all the great things that we can do with the PDF format. And a woman in the back of the room raised her hand, and she said, "This is all great, but is it accessible?" Right? Now, I don't know about you guys, but it's every speaker's nightmare to be asked a question that you have no idea what they're asking you, and you know nothing of what they're talking about. It's gives me nightmares, you know what I mean? But it ended up being a really terrific experience for me because I ended up becoming really good friends with this woman, and she kind of introduced me to the world of accessibility. And she basically explained the idea that, the PDF files that I was creating, there's a really good chance that there's a large group of people who cannot read them because I'm not making those files accessible, right? And so I chose Microsoft Word for this session because we all use Word, right? We all create Word documents, right? You can raise your hand. You can interact with me. Thank you so much. Come on in. Hello. So Microsoft Word was an obvious choice because we all use Microsoft Word. We all create Word documents pretty much on a daily basis, and the content that we create, you guys are here because you want to make sure that the files you create from Word are in fact accessible, right? Now, why do we make PDFs from the Word documents? Why don't we just share our Word documents? Go ahead.
So that PDF, unless someone has PDF writer, is not modified. That's probably the minor reason, but it's a portable document format, so everyone can read it. I mean, PDF reader is available.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the PDF stands for Portable Document Format, right? You're going to see this. I have a Word document that I'm going to use for this class, but I open up the Word document, and it looks totally different than it did on my computer. Does anybody know why? No, because they don't have the fonts on their system that I had on my system, right? And so that's one of the problems with sharing a Word document is that you can't guarantee that other people are going to see it the same way you intended it. PDF I can, right? When I make a PDF of a document, portable document format, that document can be read on a Mac, on a Windows computer, on a Linux computer. It doesn't really matter. It's going to look the same for everybody. And that's the beauty of the PDF format, right? That's really the beauty of the PDF format. And so, those are some of the reasons why we want to make a PDF of our Word document. But believe it or not, a PDF can be made way more accessible than the Word document itself, right? And I know that's surprising to some people. You're like, well, what do you mean? It's a native format. How can the PDF be more accessible than the Word document? Well, surprisingly, Word sometimes doesn't understand itself, right? And what I mean by that is a classic example is if you have a table in your Word document and you merge cells, Word doesn't know what that means. It has no idea how to interpret that information and read it, right? We're going to talk about that, as I move along. So, yes. Please do.
Because I use a screen reader.
Yeah.
So when we have in Microsoft Word, there is a table, let's say, and it's merge cells.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't read, but if you, there is an option that you can let the reader reads the columns and rows, not with NVDA, it's with JAWS more. It is somehow difficult. You have to know how to move around. I mean, like you use tabs instead of arrows, and you have to figure out a way. It's not easy for everyone.
No, no, and that's hard, especially when you can't see the table, right? Like you don't know what the table looks like, and you're trying to, using assistive technology, you're trying to imagine what this table looks like, and that's probably a frustrating experience, right?
The PDF is also the same problem. I think it's more accessible with Excel, but PDF is it's worse for you. You can't know where you are in which cell and which row in PDF. It's the same issue.
I think it can be the same issue if the file's not prepared properly. I totally agree with you on that. But I would love to share a file with you where the table was properly remediated, and I'll bet you would have a different experience. But that's the shame of it. I've talked to a lot of people, many of which whom are also blind, and they're pretty much their stance on PDF is PDFs suck. That's their blanket statement. It's like PDFs are horrible, and I'm like, well, you haven't gotten one from me yet, right? But I do argue that because there's a lot we can do in the PDF format to make it accessible, to make it readable for everyone. So, but thank you for sharing that, because that's a good point. I mean, we talk about assistive technology in a generic form. I'm sorry, what was your name? Rana was saying that she uses JAWS and NVDA, which arguably are the two most common assistive technologies in use, but they're not the only ones. There's a lot of different AT applications out there, and they don't all work the same. So that's one of the reasons why. And WCAG, which many of you are probably familiar with, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which by the way applies to PDFs as well as to the web. WCAG states that your document or web page needs to be read by all current and future technologies, right? And so we need to take the steps to ensure that the documents that we create can in fact be read by all of them. Now the point of this session, though, right, is my goal is not to show you how to create PDFs that are standards compliant. Although that's a great goal to have. It's great to want your PDF to be WCAG compliant or PDF UA compliant. That's a great goal. But my goal of this session is to show you how to fairly easily create an accessible PDF document. And there's a difference between a document being accessible and compliant. Compliant means it meets a particular standard, right? In our case, PDF UA or WCAG. But a document could still be a document could still be accessible without being compliant. It can, So even though it doesn't officially meet the standard, if you will, my goal is to show you how to create an accessible PDF that has no significant barriers. And if we could do that, then we're meeting the needs of the users. Because I will always err on the side of the user experience versus the standard. There's times when I break the standard for the benefit of the user. You're going to say something?
Does this affect the audits, if there are any audits about the accessibility, which I heard in other sessions? I'm not an expert in accessibility, but in other sessions they mentioned that there should be audits also to ensure that accessibility is taken into consideration. So does the non-compliancy but being accessible, will it pass audits?
Probably not. Probably not, because those audits are using automated software, right? And so I will tell you, I'm going to introduce you to my business partner in a second. But my business partner and I, we always say that the standards are there for a goal. And document accessibility is a combination of automated and manual testing to achieve compliance, right? Because, you know, you could create a PDF file that fully passes a checker, but is still not accessible, which is kind of weird, right? You know, you're like, well, wait a minute, it passes the checker, it passes all of the requirements, how can it not be accessible? Well, checkers are dumb. Fundamentally, checkers are pretty dumb. You know, the checker is there, and the checker is evaluating your document, and it's just checking a box. For example, alternate text. You guys all know about alternate text, right? How we need to describe images. Do you guys know about alternate text?
Yeah.
No? Some of you maybe not. I'll explain it to you in a little bit. I can put a space in the alt text field, and that'll pass a checker.
Or junk or whatever.
Or yeah, gobbledygook, you know, whatever you want you put in there. Like the Tafut, I think, showed the example of the cat,
Yes.
and the alt text said dog barking at the neighbor, right? You know, so it passes. It's not going to be a good experience because you're conveying the completely wrong information to somebody who needs that alternative text, right? So that's really important. Okay. So, my name is Chad Chelius. Sorry, what?
It's like cheating.
It is cheating. As a matter of fact, recently there was a company who was putting hidden text in the alt text of an image. Had nothing to do with the image, but it was hidden text.
So that it passes the check.
Well, they were using it a little bit differently. Like they were putting like messaging in the alternate text, like hidden messaging, which is a rude way of using alternate text, right? I mean that's not at all what it's for, right? I forget which company that was. Does anybody know what I'm talking about in here? Recently there was a big company. I forget who they were. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, it's absolutely cheating. So my name is Chad Chelius. Me and my business partner, Dax Castro, he's the big one. I'm the little one. As if you didn't know, right? We created a company called Chax Training and Consulting, where our goal is to do what I'm doing today. Teach people how to create accessible PDF documents from various applications. Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Adobe Acrobat. My specialty is Adobe InDesign. But all of those applications can create accessible PDFs.
Google Docs as well.
So Google Docs natively cannot create accessible PDF files. But there's a plugin for Google Docs called Grackle Docs. If you want to look that up if you want to. We personally don't sell that product, but Grackle Docs does make accessible PDFs out of Google Docs. You can do it, yeah. You can reach out to, this is where I'm on a different computer, so all my stuff got reformatted, but you can reach out to us at training@accessibilityunraveled.com or chad@accessibilityunraveled.com. And we have a podcast. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of the Chax Chat podcast. If you haven't, please check it out. It's a podcast on document accessibility. So if you want to like fall asleep quick at night, you can listen to my podcast, and you know. But it's also about accessibility in general. And our latest podcast, we had a guest on because when you create an accessible PDF, the tags in the document are very important. But there's also something called the reading order that a lot of people kind of like brush to the side and say, oh, I'm not going to mess with that. And this woman uses a system technology that relies on the reading order. And she explained how when she reads a document, it's word soup. It's just random words and nothing makes sense to her. You know, so those are the things that we kind of cover in the podcast. And if you guys are trying to make PDFs accessible, I highly encourage you to check out our... Did I just do that? Stop. What? That's crazy. So I could just go, maybe not that. Oh, I broke it.
You went, go.
Oh, I went, okay.
Yeah.
Can I do that?
Well, just think it.
When I want it to do it, it doesn't.
This is not accessible, so.
It's just not very accessible. We have a PDF accessibility Facebook group where you can go on there and ask questions about problems you're having, and you will get responses within minutes. We currently have about 3,500 members of this Facebook group, so check it out. I'm going to try this. I'm going to see if this works. Damn, that's cool. So I want to talk to you for a second, before we dive into Microsoft Word, how do we process information, right? We take this for granted because we do it all the time, but as a sighted user, we use visual clues to kind of understand what information is what, right? And we use things like headlines, right? I'm using a newspaper. I know I'm kind of antiquated. I'm an old guy, right? But it could be an online article too, same thing, right? But we use headlines, right, to determine what the information is about. We use photos, we use graphic borders, white space, columns, text size, and fonts to kind of, break information apart to make it understandable, okay? Now, for an accessible PDF file, we can achieve that same experience by using something called tags, right? And the analogy I like to use is like if I walked into this room with a stack of sticky notes and I started writing each person's name on a sticky note and I stuck it to you, right? That's what tagging is, right? And I'd say, well, this is a monitor, right? This is a mouse, this is a keyboard. That's the concept of tagging. In a PDF, tags are kind of imaginary things because they don't affect the visual appearance of the file, but they affect the structure. And that structure is key to how we make our PDF file accessible, right? You can see what I did here is I represented this newspaper using tags, right? And so we have a heading tag for the name of the newspaper. We have a bunch of paragraphs here. Then we have a figure. We have a heading 2, right? And so, as a sighted user, when we read a newspaper or an online article, we scan the headlines, right? By tagging a document appropriately, a user of assistive technology can do the exact same thing. They can read the headlines, they can go through the document, they can be like, oh, I wanted to know more about this. That's what I want. And then they can keep reading from there. Adding heading tags to a document is one of the key things you can do to make your document accessible.
But it does affect it visually, because header 1 has a bolder font than header 2 and a bigger font size as well. So what do you mean it doesn't accept?
That they're not connected. A user of assistive technology does not know that heading is bold, or that it's bigger.
No, the effect of heading 1 is to end up with some size of a font which is bigger than the font of heading 2.
Correct.
But so this is visual, not only structural.
But to somebody using AT, it's not. And that's one of the cool things about the PDF format, because the PDF format represents the document visually for a sighted user, but it can also represent it structurally for a user of AT. So, but you're right, creating the connection, right? I mean, the reason that a sighted user knows that it's an important heading is because it's the biggest one on the page, it's bold, and it's very obvious, right? But a user of AT doesn't know that unless we provide that information to them. And we do it by saying this is an H1. Yeah, that makes sense? So where I'm going with all of this, the tags are very important. So how do we get tags into a document from Microsoft Word? Well, the way that we do it is using styles. How many people have used styles in Microsoft Word? Okay. It's actually a surprisingly low number of people, right, who have used Styles, right? And I've talked to people who've been using Microsoft Word for 30 years. And I mentioned Styles, and they're like, what are Styles, right? But when you look back, and I'm showing my age again, right? But, you know, when I was in my 20s, I remember in the early 90s, I showed up to work one day, and there was a computer on my desk. And at that time, there was no training, right? We didn't have a class. Nobody gave us a class on learning how to use the computer. They just said, here, figure this out. You guys want to come in? Come on. And so because of this, a lot of people were self-taught. And they figured out how to do it. They figured out how to create a Word document. They figured out how to format content. Only to learn that they've been doing it wrong for 30 years. You know what I mean? And I'm going to show you Styles in a little bit. Styles have multiple benefits. One of them is from an accessibility standpoint. Because when I use the heading 1 style in Word, you use it? Awesome. You should be teaching people how to use styles in Word, I think.
I like CSS.
You what?
I like CSS.
You write CSS? HTML and CSS?
Yeah, I do.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't use Microsoft Word.
Okay. I mean, again, like Google Docs, unfortunately, I mean, I love Google Docs as well, but it doesn't give me the ability to go to the accessible PDF format. That's the only downside. Although you can export to Word from Google Docs. So, you know, you have a path, right? But as I mentioned earlier, there's a plugin called Grackle Docs that allows you to actually make accessible PDFs. And you had brought up HTML and CSS, you know, in modern web design principles, HTML is the content and CSS is the presentation. CSS is the formatting component of the equation. So like modern HTML, you have kind of two sides of the coin, right? PDF is very similar because you have the visual presentation of the page, which is the format, and then you've got the underlying structure, the markup, exactly, the HTML, right? So there's a very similar parallel between, you know, everybody wants to be like, oh, web is over here, PDF is over here. Not really. They're both very, very similar to one another, right? And as a matter of fact, if you know HTML, as I start getting into the tags, you're going to be like, oh, this makes perfect sense, you know? It's just you don't have to write code to do it. It's a little more WYSIWYG, if you will. So within Word, using heading styles is key, okay? And I'm going to show you this in a little bit. Lists. Using the bulleted and numbered list formatting in Word will create proper tags in the PDF file. Captions, figures, right? In Word, figures can be photographs, they could be bar charts, pie graphs, line graphs, right? All of those are in the category of figures, right? And whenever you have a figure in a document, it needs to be described, okay? And that applies to your bar charts and your line graphs. My partner and I, we teach a class called Writing Effective Alternate Text. Because on paper, writing alt text seems so simple. It's like, oh, just describe this. Until you're sitting in front of the document trying to describe all the figures in your document. And you're like, well, how do I describe this pie chart? How do I describe this line graph, right? How do I describe this heat map? Heat maps are brutal, right? They're feeling like, wow, you know. They're very challenging, but they can be done. It can be done. Tables, right? When I create tables in Word, they are exported properly as tables in the PDF file, right? So there's a lot of one-to-one parallels between what we do in Word and what we do in the PDF. And so I brought up a couple, I think my next slide shows you this, yeah. There's a couple of key WCAG principles that as document remediators, we live and die by. And one of the WCAG success criterions is criteria 1.3.1, info and relationships. And this is very, very simple. You can see the description here. Information structure and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. So what we were just talking about, like as a sighted person, I can visually see, this item, this item, this item. And I always tell people, one of the benefits that we have as a sighted user is what I call the helicopter view. We can look at a document at a distance and we can process so much information like this. With assistive technology, you have to navigate through the document to understand what it is one thing at a time, right? And so info and relationship simply says tag content as what it is, right? If it's a heading, tag it as a heading. If it's a figure, tag it as a figure. Caption, so on and so forth, right?
And the assistive software always uses these tags in order to determine.
Absolutely, right. So my hope is to demo that for you. My hope is to demo that for you a little bit later. But yes, so one of the things I run into a lot of times is people will create a bulleted list, but they'll do it manually. They'll type a bullet and a space and text. Word kind of makes this hard to do, believe it or not. Word wants to turn on that bulleted formatting thing, which is good. Because if you have a bulleted list and it's not tagged as a list, the user doesn't know they're reading a list. As a sighted user, when we see bullets in front of items or we see numbers in front of it, we know it's a list, right? We just know immediately. For a user of assistive technology, when a list is tagged properly, it says, list with 7 items. And they're like, oh, I'm reading a list. Cool. Let me read through that. Right? It's very, very easy. It's very logical, right? But if it's not tagged as a list, they just think they're reading another paragraph and they don't really, they don't know what they're running into.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
When we do the table, when we create a table in Word and we convert it to PDF, we save the file as PDF.
Mm-hmm.
It says a table with 3 columns and 4 rows. That's it.
Yes.
But I don't know if there is if there is a blank cell. It reads them below each other, so I don't know where is the blank cell because it doesn't say. Let's say column 1 row 1 first name. Let's say column 1 row 2 last name. It doesn't say it like that. It just says table with 3 columns, 4 rows, and you read them below each other, so you wouldn't know each word belongs to each row.
Yeah.
Cell.
Could you guys hear what she was saying back there? I know it was kind of quiet, but she was saying when she reads a table using NVDA
Yeah,
or JAWS, right? It will say table with 7 rows and 3 columns, right? Whatever it may be. And she was saying it's kind of hard to know where she is in that table, and she's absolutely right. And although I will say I don't feel like blank cells are a problem in general, blank header cells are. Okay? And then getting back to what she said, my assumption is that in that table they did not properly define the header rows. Because when header rows are properly defined, when I read a data cell, it announces the header that belongs to that data cell. Was that your experience?
No, defines it actually.
Yeah, I know.
At PDF, it's not. It doesn't read. At Word, it may be. Yeah, but at PDF, when we're at PDF, it doesn't read that this is the header. So shall we put it when we let's say type the header word titles? Shall we put control alt control 1 to make it heading 1? Is this what you mean?
means the labels of the data.
Yeah.
First name, last name.
Yeah, so
How to make it header?
I'm going to show you that. Okay, I don't know that keyboard shortcut. You probably know way more shortcuts than I do, but I don't know what the keyboard shortcut is to make a table header, but I can show you.
Yes.
Yes, I definitely will. And then the other success criterion that we live and die by is 1.3.2 meaningful sequence. And meaningful sequence, right? The order that your tags are listed in the tags pane is the order that assistive technology is going to read that content. So one of our jobs as remediators, document remediators, is to make sure that our content is read in the correct order. Very, very important, right? Because if it's not going to make any sense, right? And then another thing for you guys to understand that I always like to explain, the concept of a page, and I'd like you to comment on this too, but the concept of a page to somebody using assistive technology is fairly irrelevant. Pages are not very helpful to people who use assistive technology. Pages are a visual construct. They're created for sighted users. But for people using AT, they don't care. All of their content is read in a linear fashion from top to bottom. Okay? Or from beginning to end, right? So like page 1 to page 20.
So does this mean that the assistive technology, is this the criteria for assistive technology or for any reviewer?
Yeah, it is. It's a WCAG success criteria.
Okay, so that means the assistive technologies have to do semantic analysis in order to satisfy this criteria. Semantic analysis, not only,
Well, assistive technology does semantic analysis by voicing the objects as they're read.
But it has to see if the sequence affects the meaning. A correct reading sequence has to be programmatically determined.
Mm-hmm.
So it means it has to discover the fact that this sequence is affecting the meaning or connotation somehow, and it needs to read the proper sequence programmatically. That means heavy semantic analysis.
No, it means that we as document remediators need to ensure that sequence is correct before we give it to AT.
Okay.
AT is just going to process what we give it.
Okay.
So it's going to read those tags from top to bottom, and if I'm having it read like out of order, like it
not structurally correct, verb, subject, whatever.
Right. So again, these two success criteria. One is info and relationships. If it's a heading, make it a heading. If it's a figure, make it a figure. Like just tag it as what it is. And then the second item is meaningful sequence. Make sure that in addition to it properly being tagged, make sure those tags are being read in the correct order. Right? And Word makes this very easy because Word has a natural top to bottom flow. Right? You know what I mean? As you're creating a Word document, you start up here and it just grows towards the bottom. So your tag order and reading order out of Microsoft Word, it's really not very difficult to do. It's pretty natural. What will break that order is when you insert things like text boxes. When you insert a text box in Word and then you put like a little sidebar off to the side, that can play with your order because it kind of goes against that natural flow that Word has. You know what I mean? Okay, so what makes a Word document accessible? We got to give our Word document a title. Accessibility requires that our document has a descriptive title. I'm sure all of you in the room can agree, we don't always name our files in the most descriptive way. Right? You know what I mean? A lot of times it's like some random number or, job number or whatever it might be. So we need to give it a title to say this document is X. It's, whatever the document is. Go with the flow in Word. Top to bottom flow, it'll help you. We want to try to avoid manual formatting. And the way I did my Word document, I manually formatted it to show you this. But so often when I go into a Word document, everything in the document in the styles pane is normal. Even though it looks like a heading, it's normal, right? That's all I get in, in that document. So use styles, right? Images need to contain alt text. We can add that alt text in Word. There's a nasty feature in Word called automatically generate alternate text. Have you guys experienced this? How many of you could use it, what it gave you? Right? It's not very good, is my point. I'll show you this when we get into my file. And I'll tell you what, one of the biggest keys to success, right, in this process is leveraging the features that exist in Microsoft Word. Classic example is a table of contents. Can't tell you how many Word documents I get where somebody created a table of contents manually. They typed each line and what page it was on, it went down. There's a table of contents feature in Word. You say insert table of contents and it just builds it. But guess what?
It styles.
Thank you. What's that?
It will be linked to the title. When you use style, the content will be linked to the title.
It'll be linked to the title.
Yeah, title of the heading. When it's written,
The styles.
Yeah, the section or heading.
In one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. My brain wasn't processing it as you were saying. Yes, so that's the secondary benefit of the table of contents. Like if it's done manually, there's no links to that information. When you use the table of contents feature, it builds the TOC based on your styles, and it links to those sections of the document. It's beautiful. And it's properly tagged. It'll be tagged as a TOC tag, table of contents. And each item within is going to be linked to that destination. Really, really nice. And then last but not least, have a little patience. This process is it's not super hard, but be patient. Be patient with yourself. So, where are these things found? In Microsoft Word, we have a styles panel. I'm going to show you how to bring that up. You'll notice you have a quick styles up at the top, but I want to show you how to open that styles panel. The navigation pane is very, very useful. Come on in, man. The navigation pane is super helpful because it shows you where all your headings are in your document. Okay? Try not to cough in your ear. I like to turn on show hidden characters because that shows me the cliff notes of the document. Like if people use soft returns or they put extra returns, right? A great example is like when people have a long title of their document, like it'll say creating an accessible return Microsoft or PDF file, and when you use a return, it breaks it into 2 paragraphs. So you'll have 2 H1s in that document, which is going to sound weird if somebody's reading the heading. Like they'll say, read the headings, and it's going to say, creating an accessible. What else? And then they'll read the next heading. So I try to avoid using hard returns when it should be 1 paragraph, okay? And then the word ribbon up at the top. Okay, I'm going to skip over this. So for document structure, there's a lot of things in Word that can really help us. I just talked about the table of contents. The header-footer area of a page. You guys familiar with that feature where if you have like a running header or a running footer? When you use the when you use the header-footer area in Word, those elements are automatically artifacted. Does everybody know what I mean by artifacted? Artifacting is a term that is used to say, don't read this item. Right? So we sometimes do that with pictures, where we just used a pretty picture in the document and it doesn't really have anything to do with our project. We may artifact that picture. The header and the footer, we always want to artifact them. Because if they're read, it's disruptive to the user. Because whereas a sighted user, we may notice the footer, but we don't really read it. We just kind of keep reading to the next page. If we force a user of assistive technology to read it, it's disruptive. Like right in the middle of the content, it's going to say whatever the footer is, and whatever the header is. It's not a good experience. So
a special syntax that would make like this skip.
Nope, just using the header and footer, right? So like when you double click on the bottom or top of the page, and it goes into header footer editing mode, where you can type in there what you want it to appear, just by using that feature, it'll get artifacted.
So ATs would skip.
Yep. AT's just going to skip over it, won't read it. It'll be artifacted. Yep. Use columns. Maybe use the columns feature in Word, right? So I've seen people where they want a 2-column and they'll insert 2 text boxes on the page. No. What's that?
It's not accessible at all. It's very misleading.
No, if you use the columns feature, it is read in order. So it'll read the left column and then the right column. You won't even know, right? As an A2 user, you won't even know because it's just read in the correct order. But if somebody used text boxes, then yes, I would agree with you, maybe you're not getting a good experience. And that's what this class is all about, right? I'm trying to teach you guys, I'm trying to show you guys like what to do and what not to do, right? And it's not hard. It might be a little bit of a process change, for some people, because you're used to doing it one way, and I'm telling you to do it another way. But the results are very, very significant. Tables, we already talked about tables, and I try to avoid floating text boxes if I can. Just don't use them if possible. Okay. This is fun, by the way. Images, charts, and graphs. A lot of people think that captions and alternate text are the same thing. They're not. Captions typically describe what's happening in the photo. Alt text describes what's in the photo, right? So I probably should have put a sample over here on this, but a caption might have been like, 4 cyclists in the Parker Dam gravel race, right? Where alternate text would say,
Probably the same.
what's that?
It probably would say the same.
In this case,
caption would
in this case it might.
Caption would be saying like it's taken by some person or whatever.
Right, yeah, maybe a caption would say 4 cyclists in a race. Yeah. Yeah.
And the alt text.
Where alt text would be like, a lead cyclist in sunglasses and a purple and white jersey. You know what I mean? It's going into more detail, right? That probably wasn't a great example, but I think you guys get what I'm trying to say. Really the first question you want to ask yourself is, does the figure have value? Right? Because that's where I said, like, sometimes, not so much in Word, but sometimes we'll just put a photo there because it's pretty. It looks good, it adds visual interest to the, but fundamentally it doesn't really have anything to do with what my document is about. So in that case, we might artifact it, right? Although I did have somebody mention to me, she said, yeah, Chad, but if I'm reading this document and I'm on the phone with another user who's looking at this document and they're sighted, and they say, go to the paragraph below the figure on page 3, and you artifacted the figure, you got rid of my landmark. And I was like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And I was just thinking like value or not value, but value is
Relative.
It's relative, right? You know what I mean? So keep that in mind, Smart art in Word does not output very well. There's a trick that I like to use. You can copy that smart art, and then you'll notice when you go to paste it, you can paste it as an image. That's how I like to deal with smart art, because smart art outputs really, really wacky, you know. And then math equations, if anybody in here, I mean, you guys are in higher ed, so documents that have math equations in them, they need to be described, right? And I'm the last person in the world you want describing your math equation, let me tell you that. Yes?
I'm sorry, just like quick question. I was curious to know how is smart art read in Word? For example, for the blind people, how are how is it read?
How is it read?
Yes.
Well, the problem with smart art is that it's a combination of pieces.
Yeah.
Smart art is often, I'm trying to think of it like a good example, like smart art may,
For example, the charts.
The workflow.
Yes. How is it read?
I mean, so it's hard to answer your question. The short answer is it's not read correctly because, or potentially not read correctly. At the very least, you would have to do some cleanup in the PDF after it's made, because likely the way the smart art is designed, it will not read in the correct order, right? And so it's going to be your job to then go in after the fact. And that's why I said my preference is to cut the smart art, paste it back in as an image, and then I can accurately describe it using alternate text.
Even as a PDF?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
What? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just want to build on that question.
Yeah.
Because when you create the smart art, there's this option of double click and it opens like a text box where you insert the information. When you do it there, does it read it correctly?
It may. It may. Like I said, it's hard for me to tell you how smart art is going to output because every time I do it, it's different. Yeah, it's kind of random. So I'm not saying that you can't make smart art read correctly, but to your point, she just mentioned how she double clicks on it and there's a text box where you can change the contents. But a lot of times the smart art will have like arrows pointing to each other. So it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be your job to make sure that it's read in the order that you need it to be read.
What about objects that are embedded through OLE?
Through what?
OLE, object linking and embedding. You know, from Word, you can have an Excel document with
Oh, right.
data, and then you can go to OLE, point to a file or to a website, and embed this live chart in there.
Yeah.
How would this impact the accessibility if there is an answer?
I mean, in the case of an Excel spreadsheet, that should output as a table, right? But if you're grabbing it from like a website, that's probably just going to be tagged as a figure, right? And so then it's going to be your job to write alt text to describe it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excel is one example. You could be embedding
Yeah,
another
yeah.
Word document or any, OLE
Well-
is pretty powerful. So
Oh yeah, OLE is very powerful, but I think the benefit of using Excel is that Word understands that table structure. And so when it outputs the PDF, it's going to output that Excel area as a table, which is beneficial to us. That's really beneficial. Okay, yeah. So, okay, we talked about alt text. I want to, shoot. If you guys reach out to me, you can email me using that email I showed you in the beginning. Like I said, I was prepared to present on my laptop, and I had another file with a QR code that I was going to share with you. I want to give you guys this Word checklist that is a checklist to follow up things to do in Word to make sure you make an accessible PDF. Okay? Awesome. Talk about tables. So I wanted to talk real quickly about color, because this is an area where no checker, pretty much no checker, is really gonna deal with this problem. Okay? And so all of your text needs to have a minimum color contrast. And if it does not, it's going to fail WCAG success criteria. So text that is below 14 point or below needs to have a color contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. Okay? Now, how do you know what the color contrast is? There's a really great tool out there called the Color Contrast Analyzer. Just Google it, you'll find it. It's on the TPGI website. And it basically gives you an eyedropper where you can pick up your text color, pick up the background color, and it says, oh, your contrast is this. Have you used it?
Another one.
A similar one, okay, yeah. So regardless of what tool you use, you just want to make sure, and again, guys, think about color contrast at the beginning of the process. When you're laying out this document, when you're building this document, when you're picking a color, you should be picking a color right off the bat that has a minimum color contrast of 4.5 to 1. Right? And then text that is 14 point bold or larger only needs a color contrast ratio of 3 to 1. And that applies to graphics as well. Right? So when you're doing pie charts and things like that and you're making those pie wedges different colors, that's when you need to think, am I meeting that minimum color contrast? Right? So you want to pay attention to that.
The purpose of this is to make it for AT tools to be able to describe it better?
No, this is for low vision users.
Yeah, low vision.
This is not for users of AT.
Okay.
This would be for low vision users.
With color difficulty.
Yep.
Color blindness. Or
Well, yeah, low vision users and or colorblind users, right? Because color blindness affects 10% of the population in the United States. And the biggest demographic of people who have color blindness are old white men. Believe it or not, that's the demographic of people who are most affected, right? And we have a tendency, my partner and I call it traffic light syndrome, where when we're adding color to documents, we like to use green to indicate positive values and red to indicate negative values. The most common type of color blindness is red-green color blindness. It's called protanopia.
I think we do it on purpose sometimes.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
So is this the minimum or the ideal?
Minimum.
What is the ideal in your opinion?
I'm only concerned about the minimum.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. I mean, obviously, black on white is the maximum.
Yeah.
Right. That's your maximum color contrast. Another great resource, if you go to color.adobe.com, Adobe Color is a great tool for like building color palettes. And they've added an accessibility component to help you know when you're not meeting minimum color contrast and when you're violating colorblind, values. Yeah.
One more quick question. When the contrast here, contrast means there is something, you're referencing it or making it relative to something else.
Yes.
So when these tools or somebody measures these contrasts, how do they know what relevant entities they are comparing? Like, is it this with respect to the background? Is it one color with respect to another? How do you know the relevancy or?
Yeah. Well, so if we're talking about text, it's the color of the text
Versus the background.
versus on the background that the text is sitting on. So like here, it's white on green. Here, it's white on pink. Whatever it may
But
be.
you said in pie charts, it's one color versus another?
Well, in pie charts,
Or bar charts?
it's not only pie chart. It's not only the wedge to its background, but it's the wedge against the other wedges.
Yes, so they will not, these tools, they have enough knowledge to know the contrast among what?
No, we need your human brain to help.
Of course.
Yeah. We as humans need to. That's where we come into play. That's why checkers are not ruling the world right now, because they're dumb, and they need us to be able to evaluate that and say, oh, yeah, this works here and it doesn't work here, and then you play around with it and figure out, okay, this one works, that one doesn't. Yeah.
I would say they used to be dumb, but as of December and now, with AI, artificial intelligence, and the upcoming upgrades with Microsoft Copilot that will assist in all these accessibility, not only for Office 365, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but even on their systems, like ERP systems, company-wide systems. They are so much enhancing Microsoft Copilot, and Google has also its version of this Copilot, not only Google Bard and ChatGPT. These will make maybe many things in our discussion today obsolete.
Maybe.
They are so powerful.
Like
They are-
Yes.
recognition.
They are so powerful to translate all your recommendation automatically without our interference.
Yeah, and that would be great.
So today, for example, we need to use styles and headings. They will be able to create themselves headings and styles, although we just type dump text into our titles, you know. So all this will accelerate this accessibility in an unexpected way. Text-to-speech recognition. They can even summarize an article for you today.
Oh, sure.
Even
Sure.
today, they can summarize an article. So what about putting some formats for an accessibility of a document?
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right, and it's funny that you bring that up because I've brought this up in the past, how there's this AI technology out there. I mean, you know, my partner and I, we use ChatGPT all the time for, you know, various things. And I said, imagine if they put that technology into accessibility, right? Imagine if they actually leverage that, you know, and I think I might have been talking with Jeremy about this the other day, and we both kind of agreed that the barrier is money, right?
That's why it's available and paid right now.
Okay,
Right now on Microsoft Azure.
Azure, right.
Azure, it's a paid version called Azure Cognitive Services.
okay.
You pay for it and you get accessibility.
Now, is that for web pages?
Web pages and any system
Or
on
any
Azure.
application, you're right. Even.
Okay.
Software.
Okay.
It has a lot of applications.
So that sounds super promising.
But one small remark here. Yes, this will accelerate and reduce a lot of the effort that he is describing right now in the conventional methods. But believe it or not, I mean, I've worked in AI and stuff. You will still need human review at the very end.
Yes.
The
I
moment,
agree.
like for example, if you get me something which is completely, you know, generated through, you know, generative AI, and you're telling me no human reviewed it, I will throw it.
No,
Because one mistake in one critical area, because the learning model did not include the proper information, and you know the generative AI did not pick it because it's a learner.
Yes, yes.
Then that could be very detrimental. So a human touch at the very end,
Yes.
not at every step maybe, like the effort is much less. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. But I'd like to add this comment always,
I fully
never
agree.
skip the last human touch on it, especially
I
in
fully
critical
agree.
areas.
I fully agree. That's why until today, all AI algorithms are biased. And to remove this bias, you need this latest human touch on it.
And they will remain biased, but their bias will become less. But this 0.1% that they could miss at the end could be very critical or detrimental in some cases.
Well, and I somewhat take that back because the PAC 2021 checker actually has a color contrast evaluator built into it. And it does really good on native objects like text elements or colored shapes in your document. Where it fails is if you've got a graphic, in the graphic is an image of text. It can't check that. It's done, right? It doesn't know to go into that graphic and evaluate those elements within the graphic, right? Now, I'm sure AI can do it. I'm sure it's possible, right? But, you know, that's an example of where they implemented it and it just fell short. And so, to your point, a human still at the end needs to evaluate it and say, oh, wait a minute, this image doesn't work. To that point, though, whoever placed that image at that point should have evaluated it and said, this does not meet minimum color contrast, and made the change then. Because you want to do as much of this thing on the front end You don't want to wait till the PDF's created to identify a problem. You want to identify that problem up front. And that is going to pay huge dividends. Because fixing it at the end is painful, right? Because people have already seen it, they've approved it, they've signed off on it, and now you're going back and saying, oh, wait a minute, nobody wants to, they just want to push it through. So, yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. Yeah. I want to show you this one. This is colorblind design, right? I have 3 colored circles over here on the left, like red, green, and purple. Those are those same 3 circles viewed by somebody who has protanopia, right? So you see how those first 2 colors are now very similar, right? They're very hard to distinguish. And so that's where we need to pay attention to the colors that we're using, you know, to make sure. And we run into this so often with line graphs, bar charts, because we like to use colors to indicate. And by the way, that's another accessibility violation. One of the WCAG success criterion is use of color alone. You can't use color alone to indicate the meaning of something, right? And even on the WCAG webpage, they give the example of, see this chart where Tom's sales are in red and Jane's sales are in blue.
So legends are not sufficient then in a graph or in a chart?
Well, it depends on the color, right? Because if I have 2 colors that are these 2, that's going to be hard for me to discern. So how do you overcome this? Labels. Put labels on it, right? That indicate this is what this means, right? In your chart, you know, above the 1 bar, put 23%, 18%. That way, I don't need color to determine what the value of that is, right? Yeah. So there's definitely ways of overcoming this. All right, guys, cool. So I'm going to get out of here, and we're going to dive into Word for a second. Now this is where it gets weird because I have to look at this board to figure this out. So okay. All right. So here's an example, and I think what I'm going to do, because I can't look at my screen. Oh, no, wait. You're not seeing it. There we go. Okay. So this is a document I put together. It's about my hometown, Philadelphia. What's that?
You're from Philly?
Yeah.
My daughter is studying there now.
Oh, awesome. What college?
UPenn.
UPenn. Yeah. My daughter's down there too. Not at UPenn, but in the same area. So this is a great example, right? Here's a photo on the front page, right? And the first question I need to ask myself is, does that photo have any value, right? Like in the context of my document is about visiting Philadelphia, right? So this is where you have to make a decision. It's like, okay, do I want to describe a view of the buildings of Philadelphia at night in the glowing street lights? I don't know, maybe I would. I think that might add value to the document, But if it's a different photo and you're like, wow, this has really nothing to do with my project, we may want to artifact it, right? So let's talk about alt text for a quick second, right? So if I click on this photo in Word, if you right click, you're going to see an option. Okay, I'm on a different version of Word now, right? On more recent versions of Word, there's going to be an option that says View Alt Text, right?
Yeah.
This is an older version of Word, so I have to choose Format Picture. And when I do, if I click on this third icon, here is my alternate text, okay? Now, because I built this in my version of Word, it used automatic alt text generation. So in the modern version of Word, when you drop an image in, this option is turned on by default. It's going to automatically generate alt text for that image.
Using image recognition, you mean?
Using AI,
How good,
right?
How good is it?
It's horrible. It's horrendous. Don't turn it off. I tell people turn it off because it's useless. This says a city street with a statue and trees.
Okay.
Not really what I'm trying, not the message I'm trying to convey here, yeah? And then what cracks me up is Microsoft writes at the bottom, description automatically generated. Thank you so much for telling me that, you know? So yeah, so I would want, and again, I always say to people, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I mean, I'm a graphic designer by trade. I'm the worst person in the world to write alt text for these photos. There are people out there who can do a much better job than I can. Somebody in an editorial role, copy editor, photo editor, you know, whomever, they'd be much better suited to this task. But if my job is to make this document accessible, I kind of have to write the alternate text, right? So what I might do here is I might say a nighttime view of Center City. Sorry, I'm trying to type with my head turned like this. Center City, Philadelphia, showing light, traffic, and the glow of street lights. That's all the alt text I'm going to write today. But you guys get the idea. So, you know, the idea behind alt text is keep it concise, but be as descriptive as you can. You know.
The purpose you want it, because an image can be interpreted in many ways.
Agreed. And one of the best questions you can ask yourself is, what do you want the user experience to be? And if you answer that question, then you're going to do a good job of writing the alternate text, because now you have a purpose. You know.
I have a question. What if I'm really concerned about, you know, because a sighted person would look at a picture and would think, you know, you talked about it as a marker that you could use in a, and it's a hard decision for me to artifact it because my audience would be someone that does, I work with arts and development, so there are a lot of things that go in a photograph.
So many ways of interpreting it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how, I mean, I would, or an expert would decide what nuance would be there.
Mm-hmm.
However, what would be something from your experience that is not overwhelming to a general audience, for example? Because I don't want them to miss some of the nuances yet. I don't want to overwhelm them.
Yeah.
So what would be?
Yeah, it's a hard.
I know it is hard, but
and again, I would ask yourself what you want the user experience to be.
I want there to be a little bit of nuance, but not to overwhelm the audience. So I think that's. I don't know if there's a standard for that. That's why I'm asking. But
there's not.
There is not.
There's not at all. I mean, you know, I don't know what I'm doing here. The alt text requirements from a WCAG standpoint are not elaborate.
Okay.
Right? They're basically saying describe the photo.
Okay.
Right? You know, fundamentally. I think for you and for your organization, you guys need to sit down and come up with a approach. Right, to describing those things,
or do some research on it.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something?
Sorry, but again, to avoid reinventing the wheel, there are tools, AI-powered captioning and alternate text softwares like the script, where you upload the picture, and you provide a line on the purpose of your document, and it proposes to you back an alternate text. So if you have huge images, instead of spending hours doing that, you use AI and your knowledge is on top of AI to get the proper...
Like another prompt to make it more, answer more specific.
It will give you hundreds in seconds, so you just pick one, the best fitting one, and you
Yeah, it's very assistive.
I mean, I think the reality is, like, a lot of people in this room do not have access to that AI that you're talking about, So I think although that would be great for you and your organization, I think for the masses currently, it's not really an option that they can leverage. But I agree with what you're saying. I mean, you can leverage AI to give you a starting point, just like we use AI for ChatGPT.
Well, it's going to already become part of these tools. I mean, Microsoft, Google.
Well, it already is.
No, but now with the GPT.
Yeah.
I mean, they're factoring this capability into the editors.
Yeah.
So you could ask for the assistance, and then it will use the GPT to give you the answer, continue your paragraph, write you an email,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
Because the same way today we have extensions to our browsers like Chrome. All these will come as extensions to all our tools that we are using.
Already are in there.
So again, what happened? All my fonts got whacked out when I moved them onto this machine. But anyway, I just changed it to a different font. And so let's talk about styles for a second, right? So way up here in your ribbon, I feel like I'm in people's way. Up here in your ribbon, this is what's called your quick styles. And if you click on this little button right here, that's going to open up your styles panel. And it gives you access to all the styles in your document. And I did this on purpose. I did this on purpose because I wanted to show you this is what I typically see. So somebody made this heading big, bold, a different font, but in my styles panel, it's still based on the normal style. I like to call this Abby normal. If anybody gets that, you're old like me. Do you get it? What, do your parents watch it or something like that? So the movie is Young Frankenstein. That's my reference. But so the normal style, it only maps to a P tag. Okay? And I think what I'm going to do real quickly, if I can. So another lesson here. When you make a PDF, never go to File, Print, and print to a PDF.
Save that.
Yes. When you print to a PDF, you will get zero accessibility, right? And I'm telling you this because I know it's a very common way that people make PDF files, right? But the minute you do that, you just kill all accessibility in this file. So another better approach, I'm going to show you a couple ways. Save as. I'll put it on my desktop here. Where are you? Here we go. And then in the Save As type, I'm going to choose PDF. And if I go to my options here, this is the magic, right? If you turn on your document properties and document structure tags for accessibility, this is going to give you a tagged PDF, okay? Now when I, let me give this a name. Oops.
It's not showing.
Hey, Chad.
You can't see chat.
Sorry, say that again?
When I'm saving the document, I go to more options and I turn on the accessibility.
Yeah, so
Sorry, this is not reflecting
Sorry, I'm not seeing
what
what's
you're doing.
going on.
So for you, it would be Alt F, A. I'm not good with this. I don't know how you get to that, but yeah, it's in the Save As type drop-down menu. And you can change it from Word document to PDF.
Yes, I know here.
Okay.
I know how to do it here, but the next step is before you press
Yeah, there's two checkboxes. One is called document properties and one is called document structure tags for accessibility. And that will give you a tagged PDF. And this computer does not have Adobe Acrobat on it, so I can't show you what I wanted to show you. But if I would have been able to open this PDF and I look at the tags, it's going to be all P tags. Nothing but P tags, right? P stands for paragraph. I'm sorry, I should have told you that. Yeah, the P stands for a paragraph, right? And we know when we look at this document that there are headings. There are headings throughout this document, but they're not reflected in the structure. And that violates info and relationships, okay? So now I'm going to show you so back in Word, I want this to be a heading, all right? But it's currently normal. So what I can do, you see where I have heading 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the right of heading 1 and I'm going to click on this arrow. And I'm going to choose Update Heading 1 to match selection. And when I do that, now you can see that heading 1 is applied to that text. And by doing that, this will be tagged as an H1 tag in the PDF file, right? Go down a little bit further here. I feel like I lost. Here we go. So here's another heading, right? I'll come over here to heading 2 and say update heading 2 to match selection. And what I'm going to do at the bottom of the styles panel, I'm going to turn on show preview. And that way in my styles pane, you actually get a preview of what those headings look like, you know? And now what I would need to do, guys, is I would need to come over here, click on heading 2, right? Come down here, click on heading 2, right? So it's a little bit of work for me to go through, like when you've received a Word document that was not built correctly, you got to put a little bit of work into it to go back in and say, okay, apply all your styles where they need to go. But now if I make a PDF of this, you're going to see H1 tag, H2 tag, H2 tag all throughout the document, and it'll be tagged correctly.
And how would you look at the tag or see the tags in PDF?
So,
Is it like
so
reader you can say show
Yes,
tag?
I think level 1.
well, so in the PDF, on the left side, you have something called the navigation pane. I do have Reader installed. Let me just open with Reader. I'll just show you where it would be. So you see this.
Because you want to review your PDF as well to
Yeah.
make sure that the tags are there
Yep.
just as a
So there's a step that we go through that we call in the industry, when you make your PDF, one of the last things you want to do is something called walking the tags tree. And you basically go into the tags pane and you would find it over here. So this strip over here is called the navigation pane. And in Acrobat Pro, if you right click here, you can choose tags. That's how you can see the tags in the PDF file. I can't show you here because I didn't realize Adobe Acrobat wasn't installed.
and that's in the Pro only or in
Pro.
Reader?
Pro only. Yeah. Yeah. So if you only have Reader, you're not going to be able to evaluate it.
Mark it.
Yeah. So, but anyway, you would see the tags here, and you could go through. Yeah, like I said, I being on a different machine is kind of hamstringing me a little bit.
If you have the Pro, which includes the writer, is it typical or a practice that, okay, if you see an unexpected result in your PDF, like you did everything,
Yep.
but you still want to tag something or missing, do you continue that through the editing of the PDF, or do you go back to your Word and redo?
It's a great question. I prefer to go back to Word because I want my Word document to be repeatable, right? So that throughout the process, if you may have different clients than me, but when my client comes back and says, "Oh man, we forgot to put a paragraph in on page 3," I can dump it in, spit out a new PDF, and I'm already 80% there, right? Because what you have to remember is everything you fix in Acrobat,
There's nothing more.
you've got to redo if you spit out a new PDF. So I always try to do as much as I can in Word to facilitate the process, okay? So that's styles. Tables. So as I go down a little bit further here, here we go. So I have a table here. I feel like I lost all my formatting on this table. That's really weird. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me do. I'll just do something like that for now. So when you select a table and you go to the Design tab, I think in new versions of Word it's called Table Design. But way over here, do you see how you have a checkbox that says Header Row and First Column? Header Row is going to make the first row of your table a header row. Okay? And First Column will make the first column a header row. So in this particular table, I probably want to do both. Right? So I'll turn on header row, and then I'll turn on first column. And wow, that really messed up my formatting here. There we go. And so what that'll do is in my PDF file, this is going to be a header row, and this is going to be a header row. And now, when I read this table using assistive technology, when I go here, it's going to say restaurant name, Tallulah's Garden, because that is the header cell for that data cell. And when I move over, it'll say address, 210 West Washington Street. And if I move down, it'll say veg, address, 1221 Locust Street. So it's important, the way you do it is in the Table Design tab, and you can turn on header row or first column in that file. All right. We talked about the alt text, guys. Oh, you can see my header and footer here. If I double click, you can see I'm in header footer editing mode. And as I said before, anything I put in that area will automatically be artifacted. So you don't have to worry about it being read in the document. Oh, here's one. Bulleted list, right? When I make this a bulleted list, that is going to be read as a list. And so when it gets to this, it's going to say list with 8 items. And then it'll read those items. All right? So guys, I think I'm running out of time here. But I do want to thank you guys for coming. And if you guys have any questions as we're leaving, I can answer them as we're walking out the door.